Chairman Thompson, it's my pleasure to welcome all of you to Lawson State Community College this morning. And on behalf of all of our faculty, staff, and student body on both the Bessemer campus and the Birmingham campus, it's our distinct pleasure to welcome each and every one of you to Lawson State Community College. Please pray with me this morning. Dear Heavenly Father, we come now with bowed heads and humble hearts, thanking you for the many blessings that you have bestowed on each of us. We pray now that you provide your wisdom and guidance on the deliberation that will be made here today on behalf of the students who attend colleges that comprise the Alabama Community College system. Lord, bless our trustees, our chancellor, support staff, and all the members of the college system who work tirelessly every day to improve the lives of our students. Lord, we thank you for your many, many blessings. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Attention, salute, pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please call the roll. Present. Here. Here.
I'm here, Karen from Boston, Massachusetts.
Thank you. Next item is the approval of our agenda. Mr. Chair, before we approve the agenda, I would like to recommend that we add 3 items under 8A. They're items 4, 5, and 6. Each is a recommendation for the appointment of a president, one to Bishop State, one to Central Alabama Community College, and one to Gadsden State Community College.
Motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Okay, there's been a motion by Mr. Davis. Is there a second? Second. Any discussion on the agenda as presented? There being none, all those in favor, raise your hand if you approve. Raise your hand if you approve the agenda. Those opposed? The agenda is approved. Thank you.
I've just been asked if you could get as close to the microphone as possible. We're trying to record this, and the sound folks are having a little trouble with it. So, thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, the next item on the agenda, item 5, is the approval of the minutes of our last regular meeting, the September 17th meeting. Everyone was presented this in advance of the meeting, has had time to go over it. Is there a motion on the minutes?
So moved.
A motion by Ms. Brown. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Okay, any discussion? There being none, the motion on the floor is the approval of the minutes of the September 17, 2015 meeting. All those in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Item 6, public comment. Is there any, Ms. Sharp? No public comment. Next item on the agenda is item 7, instructional and student services facilities, physical information technology, adult education, and workforce development.
And I recommend approval of item 7A1.
Is there a motion to approve item 7A1?
Motion.
Second. It's been a motion and a second. We have before us allocation of 2015-16 industry certification initiative funds. Is there any discussion on this item? Any comments, Chancellor? There being none, I'll entertain a we'll go to a vote. You already have a motion and a second. Forgive me. All those in favor of item 7A1, raise your hand. Anyone opposed? That item's approved. Next is item 8A.
And I'd like to recommend 8A, 1, 2, and 3, and then I'd like to take 4, 5, and 6 each individually. But let's begin. My recommendation is 8A, 1 through 3 for approval.
Okay. Under the action items, 8A, 1, 2, and 3, it's a revised mission statement. Item 1 for Central Alabama Community College. Item 2 is a lease agreement for Central Alabama Community College. And item 3, general liability insurance for the Alabama Community College system. Is there a motion to approve these 3 items?
I'll make a motion.
It's been a motion by Mr. Davis and a second by Ms. Foy. Any discussion on these items? Everyone was presented these in advance.
Mr. Chairman, if I might.
Yes, sir.
Under the indemnification clause, do we have also coverage for additionally insured as part of the indemnification? If not, I think we need to look at that going forward. Covered and listed on their insurance policy. I'm just going from past history, and if you're not listed on the policy, is that well enough for us to be covered?
They will be listed as
Okay.
Any other discussion or questions about items 8A, 1 through 3? There being none, all those in favor of items 8A, 1 through 3, raise your hand. Opposed? Those items pass.
I'd like to begin next with item 8A4. My recommendation for the appointment of a president to Bishop State Community College. And I think, as we have discussed before, we follow a very rigorous process in selecting these presidents. And I feel like I have 3 very excellent candidates. My recommendation for Bishop State Community College is Dr. Valerie Richardson. And I'd like to take just a moment and give you a brief snippet of her bio. You have a more complete information in your folder. But Dr. Richardson earned her bachelor's degree in biology and sociology and her master's degree in counselor education from Jacksonville State University. She holds a doctorate in higher education administration from the University of Alabama. Dr. Richardson is a graduate of the Alabama Community College System Leadership Academy and the Thomas Lakin Institute for Mentored Leadership. Dr. Richardson has been employed at Gadsden State Community College, where she held various positions, including vice president, acting president in 2008 and 2011, dean of institutional advancement and community services, and director of Veterans Upward Bound. Dr. Richardson previously served as interim president of Chattahoochee Valley Community College and has most recently served as interim president at Bishop State Community College. It is my recommendation that Dr. Valerie Richardson be appointed president of Bishop State Community College.
Thank you, Chancellor. Is there a motion to approve this recommendation by the Chancellor?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Smith. There's been a second by Mr. Davis.
Second.
Okay.
Any discussion? I would just make one comment. I've had the pleasure to know Dr. Richardson for my brief tenure on the State Board of Education and on this Board of Trustees, and she has distinguished herself in her service in the community college system, and I think she's the right person at the right time for this great institution, Bishop State in Mobile, Alabama. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Dr. Richardson is approved.
Very good. And before we move on to the next one, I would invite Dr. Richardson just to come to the podium for just a brief comment. Dr. Richardson?
Good morning, Chancellor. Good morning, Board of Trustees. Thank you so very much. I thank you for the opportunity. I thank you for bestowing your confidence in me to serve as the next president at Bishop State Community College. I'm excited about the opportunity to provide services to Mobile County, and Bishop State Community College is just what it says it is. It belongs to the community, and that's providing delivery of services to business and industry and serving that community. Again, thank you, and I look forward to much success. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Richardson. 8A5, recommendation for appointment of a president for Central Alabama Community College. My recommendation is Dr. Susan Burrow. Dr. Burrow earned her bachelor's degree in nursing from the University of North Alabama and her master's degree in nursing from the University of Alabama at Birmingham. She completed postgraduate family nurse practitioner coursework at the University of Alabama at Birmingham and earned her doctoral degree in higher educational leadership from the University of Mississippi. Dr. Burrow has been serving as the interim president of Central Alabama Community College since February of 2013. She previously served on the faculty and in numerous leadership positions for Bevel State Community College, having most recently served as the Hamilton campus dean before accepting the assignment at Central Alabama. Dr. Burrow currently serves on the board of directors for the Alabama Community College All Alabama Academic Team Foundation, as well as numerous economic development boards. It is my recommendation that Dr. Susan Burrow be appointed president of Central Alabama Community College.
Is there a motion to approve the Chancellor's recommendation of Dr. Burrows?
I'm very excited and proud to make a motion that we accept the recommendation from the Chancellor for Dr. Susan Burrow. She will do a great job for Central Alabama.
Thank you, Ms. Foy. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? There being none, all those in favor of approving this recommendation of Dr. Burrows for presidency of Central Alabama Community College, please raise your hand. Anyone opposed? Motion's approved.
Good, thank you, and I would ask Dr. Burrow if she might come forward and make a few comments.
Good morning, Dr. Howard and Board of Trustees members. It is indeed a privilege and an honor to be selected to serve as the next president of Central Alabama Community College. My 2 years and 8 months at Central has been a pleasure, a great deal of hard work. It's a fine institution. I look forward to continuing the traditions of that fine institution and growing the future of the institution to serve our state. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Burrow. Under item 8A6, recommendation for the appointment of president for Gadsden State Community College. My recommendation is Dr. Martha Lavender. Dr. Lavender earned her associate degree in nursing from Gadsden State Community College, the bachelor's degree in nursing from Jacksonville State University, and her master's degree in nursing and doctoral degree from the University of Alabama at Birmingham. Dr. Lavender has been serving as the interim president of Gadsden State Community College since September of 2014. She previously served on the faculty and in leadership positions at Gadsden State, having retired in 2011 as the Dean of Health Sciences. Dr. Lavender has previously been honored with the Distinguished Service Award by the Gadsden State Alumni Association and was previously named as the Alabama Community College's Outstanding Administrator. Dr. Lavender was inducted in 2013 into the Alabama Nursing Hall of Fame. And most recently, this past Saturday, Dr. Lavender was inducted by the American Academy of Nursing as a 2015 Academy Fellow. This is an elite national honor of significant standing. Only 3 from our state were inducted, and Dr. Lavender was one of those 3. It is my recommendation that Dr. Martha Lavender be appointed president of Gadsden State Community College.
You have before you item 6, recommendation for approval of Dr. Martha Lavender as president at Gadsden State Community College. Is there a motion to approve that?
Mr. Chairman, I'm honored to make the motion to appoint Dr. Martha Lavender, President, Gadsden State Community College.
Thank you, Mr. McAnally. Is there a second by Mr. Davis? Thank you. Any discussion? Any comments? There being none, all those in favor of approving Dr. Martha Lavender as president of Gadsden State Community College, please raise your hand. Opposed? That's confirmed.
Very good. And Dr. Lavender, I would invite you to the podium to make a few comments.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Trustees, and Dr. Heinrich, I am deeply honored to be selected to serve as president of Gadsden State Community College. For the last 12 months, we've worked very hard to overcome some of the change and transition that we've had at the college. I'm privileged to work with a very talented faculty and staff, and I have the opportunity to kind of open doors for them. I believe there are possibilities everywhere and opportunities for us to improve, and I am very committed to making those opportunities our reality. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Lavender. Okay, with that, we're going to move on to the orientation portion of our program. And I know I've had an opportunity to speak with all of the board members about the underprepared or unprepared student issue in our state. In fact, it's really a national epidemic. It's not unique to our state. But I know this board and the State Board of Education has made a commitment to address this issue. And as I just discussed with you probably a month or so ago, my approach is to bring in experts to educate all of us to make sure that we're moving forward according to the science, according to the literature. And today we have one of those experts with us. And in fact, I'm elated. This individual that I'm going to introduce in just a moment is well known across our country and in all circles associated with developmental education. Dr. Edward Morente is currently a consultant in higher education. He retired from College of the Desert in Palm Desert, California in 2005 as Professor Emeritus after working there for 14 years as a faculty member, counselor, grant writer, and administrator. He began his career as a licensed psychologist and director of the Counseling Center at New Jersey Institute of Technology. From there, he became the director of the New Jersey Basic Skills Assessment Program, a statewide effort to assess the skills of entering students at all public and a dozen independent colleges in the state, as well as evaluate the outcomes of all developmental education programs. Several years later, Dr. Morente was named Director of College Outcomes Evaluation Program, a state effort to evaluate student learning and other aspects of higher education at all public colleges and universities in New Jersey. In 1991, he was named College of the Desert Dean of Student Services and Learning Resources, responsible for a variety of programs, including admissions, financial aid, the Learning Center, counseling, financial aid, TRIO program, international students, student activities, disabled students, library, institutional research, media center, and athletics. And I hope they paid you enough for all those responsibilities. Anyhow, Dr. Morante has also been a trainer for evaluating TRIO programs for 10 years, served on the Assessment Council of the Western Governors University for 10 years, taught assessment, placement, and evaluation at the Kellogg Institute for Developmental Education for more than 25 years, and has been a data coach with Achieving the Dream since it began more than 10 years ago. Dr. Morante is the author of several journal articles and book chapters, and was featured in an interview with the Journal of Developmental Education in 1998. He has been a frequent speaker, trainer, workshop leader, and grant writer with over $50 million won for various colleges. Dr. Morante holds a bachelor's degree in psychology from Manhattan College in New York and a master's and doctorate in counseling psychology from the Teachers College, Columbia University. I think you can see why we invited Dr. Morante. His credentials are impeccable. Dr. Morante, we would invite you to the podium.
Thank you, Chancellor. Appreciate the introduction. And no, they didn't pay me enough. Whoever gets paid enough. I appreciate being invited by the board, by you and by the board. Two things I want to say before we begin. First of all, I have been the data coach for Central Alabama Community College for the past 2 years, arriving shortly after Dr. Burrows came. And I want to congratulate you for recommending her and approving her as the president. I can give firsthand account that she has done an absolutely fantastic job changing that college, the leadership, bringing in people, turning the culture, which frankly was less than anyone would want to see at a community college, into one where the faculty and staff are excited. She has done a superb job, and I'm happy to work with her, and I'm so happy I really needed to say that. So congratulations to her, but also to all of you for appointing her. The second thing is I met the chair of the board, Al Thompson, before the meeting, and that brought back memories. The chairman of the psychology department at Teachers College when I was a graduate student was also named Al Thompson, and we discovered there's no relationship. But it reminded me of a story that I wanted to tell to start this. As you heard from the introduction, I was born and raised in the Bronx in New York City, and I applied for the doctoral program at Teachers College, and the chairman of the department, Dr. Thompson, invited me in, said, we've decided to accept you to the doctoral program, but there's a condition. So I said, okay, what's that? He said, your entire career, all of your education has been in New York City, and you must promise that if you get your doctorate, and we expect you to get it, that you will move out of New York. So I said, okay. And when I got my doctorate, I followed through, and I moved to New Jersey. Now, some of you may think that, so what? It's like crossing the river, big deal. Well, the big deal is not crossing the river. Geographically, you're right, it's not that far. But my wife is from New Jersey, so I had to move to a state that I had swore I would never live in with all my in-laws. And that was not easy to do. Excuse me, I happened to get a phone call at this right time. But let's turn this off. And then my mother-in-law moved to California, and now we live in Palm Desert. Is there something wrong with me or what? Again, thank you. This is on underprepared students, and it's a topic that I appreciate you looking at. I forgot, I can control this. Good. No good. Let's go this way. Perfect. Okay. Community colleges have been serving our country for over a century. Very popular in the 1960s, and they expanded greatly. They provide low-cost education to people who otherwise couldn't afford it. They address multiple roles, transfer to a university, job retraining, and opportunities for career education as well as for transfer education. They provide second and third and sometimes more opportunities. Students who have dropped out of school or who never finished school, whether it's high school or whatever, or dropped out of a university, have an opportunity to try again. And they offer the open door of admissions, and I wanted to explain about that. Open door is a philosophical and practical way to providing access to, let me turn this a little bit so I'm looking at the audience as well. An open door opportunity for access to the post-secondary education. They do things that universities use select processes like the ACT, SAT and ACT, and other variables to select students because they want to get the best students. Community colleges use the open door to allow students without necessarily the credentials that would get into a university, although many also do because it's low cost, and provide an opportunity for those students to succeed. But without quality, access is meaningless. You're providing opportunity to get in, but then you get a degree that means nothing. So what we're trying to do in community colleges, and I say we because I've spent my last 20 years of my life working with this, is to provide both quality as well as access. In practical terms, don't get confused that the ability to benefit means low standards. It doesn't. It means an opportunity to start. And in practical terms, the ability to benefit from higher education, the open door policy, is typically determined by whether students can succeed or not. Okay, we'll let you in, but you have to prove, you have to demonstrate by passing college courses that in fact you deserve to get the kind of degree that you're looking for. National reports. There have been, in the last 5 years or so, a series of national reports. These are the highlights. There is a need for more workers with higher levels of skills. You've heard that from the administration in Washington, that students need to get some post-secondary education. Or as some people are saying, the college of today is like the high school of 20 years ago. Higher levels of skills require more students needing post-secondary education. Doesn't necessarily mean a degree yet, but in the future it's likely to be. Significant numbers of students enter college lacking many of the skills, both cognitive and affective, needed for college courses. That's a given. Virtually every assessment of students in the country for the past 40 years has shown that. And the lack of academic skills is especially prevalent in mathematics. In fact, and I'll talk about this more later, college algebra seems to be the single most detrimental obstacle to students succeeding in college, maybe second only or tied with financial aid. Student success rates, especially in developmental education, at community colleges are unacceptably low. So we take students in, we provide them with access, we put them in developmental education, and many of them never get out. Many of them drop out of college. Too many students drop out and do not complete their programs or majors. There was a wide range of standards, and this is an important statewide issue in every state and across the country. There is a wide range of standards, policies, courses, and services across states and within most states, including yours. Cut scores, standards, grading is different from campus to campus, even when you use the same test and what seems to be the same definitions. That's prevalent, and it's a national issue. State funding for higher education has been traditionally based on enrollments and largely without incentives for promoting student success. So if you get funded, it's frequently, largely, from how many students you have. And if you live in certain places in our country, like my college in California, you had many more students than the state was willing to pay for. So there was no incentive to keep students. And that has happened in a number of places. That's not true, as I understand, in Alabama. Developmental education is needed to improve the skills of many entering students. There is a need for reform, however, improvements in developmental education, including assessment and placement. So how do we reconcile the following? Need for more workers with higher education, significant numbers of underprepared students, and too many students are not completing their programs or degrees. And I hope you can see this when we put this up. Okay, can people see that? This is taken from these data are taken from the ACT annual report on college readiness. And I'm not going to go through every number, but some key parts are there. First of all, it's important to state that 55,000 students took the test in 2015, and 31,000 students, no, I'm sorry. Let me go back. Let's go back. This is out of order, so let me see. Okay, let's do this one. Yeah, you know, you look at something 17 times and you still make a mistake. It's amazing. 65%. Okay, let's go back to what I said before. 37,000 students took the ACT, high school graduates of 12th graders, in 2014. In 2015, 55,000 students took it. Now that's important because the difference between those numbers, 37 and 55, means that students who normally would not take the ACT took the ACT. When that happens, when you have 75% of your students take it and you move to 100%, the average scores, the mean scores drop. Okay, that's an important quality when you look at the data then. Because in fact, what happens is the students who took the test, you compared to national averages, and I'm just going to read it from here because the numbers are not that important as is the concepts. In Alabama, 65% of your students were college ready in 2014, 53% in 2015. And that follows in mathematics, 31% in 2014, 23% in 2015. In reading, 43% and 34% this year. Now, I'm saying that the drop took things out of those data. One, the drop is because you had students who normally wouldn't be going to college to take the test. And that's a normal thing to find, and not meaning that suddenly the students got significantly poorer. But what is key is that still so many students are coming to college not prepared to handle college level work. It's not Ed Moranti's data, this is data from the ACT. And that sets up the stage that what I said before about community college taking in students who are not ready for college is true in Alabama. And that has implications then to what to do about it. Some people have argued that the reason we have so many students doing poorly is because we have developmental education. In fact, developmental education, as I will elaborate on, is set up to deal with the underpreparedness of so many students. And by the way, it's not just in community colleges. Many four-year colleges, many four-year universities, especially open access community colleges, have the same kinds of low-income, first-generation, high-risk, low-skill students. Now, in looking at the one that's up here, this is by race. In English, 65% of all students, but among whites, it's 77%, and among blacks, it's 38%. So twice as many students who are white do better, are ready for college than are among their black students. Similar kinds of things in math. In fact, it's worse. It's 4 times as much. 40% of your white students are ready, 9% are ready in 2014, 7% in 2015. The 2014 is probably better to look at because the 2015 almost exaggerates the situation. It doesn't really matter. The differences are demonstrated enough that there's a need for dealing with this. And in reading, the scores are similar. White students, 53% are ready, 18% in 2014, 14%. And across all content areas, 28% in 2014, 4% of white students, 4% of black students. So that another issue besides having underprepared students is that your African American students are not doing nearly as well as, or are not as prepared coming into your college. And that's a sizable proportion of your graduating students. I want to go back to one more chart. Oh my goodness, I can't believe it. There, okay. This talks about aspirations. And on this chart, it's divided between Voc Tech, two-year colleges, students who want a bachelor's degree, students who want to get a graduate degree, people with a professional degree, other, no response. Okay. As you look at the numbers, the overwhelming majority of students, over 80% of your students, want to get a college degree. So it's not like you have a whole bunch of students who took the test because their principal said they had to. It's that these students want to go to college. Okay, so now you have two factors. One, I want to go to college, but I'm not prepared. The question is, what do we do about it? Do we close the open door and not let them in? And then we have a problem finding people who have the kind of skills that are needed for the college, and not only for the college environment, for the workforce, now and increasingly so in the future. I have a chart up there for the definition of college readiness. You can read that in the report. That's not necessary to make the point. That's what this one is about. Okay. Nationally, about 2/3 of entering students enter community colleges underprepared for college work. If you don't have, so if I could go to a college and I see 10% of your students are placed in developmental education program, I have to either wonder that your college has a district that has exceptional students coming out of your high school, or what are your standards for placing students in? And this comes back to different colleges having different standards, and you need to consider, well, maybe we need to look at what we determine is readiness for college. The ACT is saying your students need it. If you don't, maybe that's a question that needs to be considered. Underprepared students are not only have academic skills below college level, they also lack information about college procedures, policies, programs, and services. Many of them are first-generation students. The definition of first generation is your parents went to college or not. When I went to college, I'm a first-generation student. My parents didn't go to college, so I couldn't ask them, well, what do I do? I had to learn that myself. But I had friends whose parents went to college, and that was very helpful. Many of our students now, especially community colleges, do not have those resources to ask. What's it like? So you have to take general education courses. Oh, I took general education courses in high school. No, that's not the same. And that's assuming they even ask a question about what is general education. The bottom line is they know diddly squat about what's necessary to go to college and what's required, what the professors want them to do. They know nothing about career choices frequently and what it takes to major in a particular thing. What does it mean to have a major? I want a job. I know I need a college degree. I have no clue what it's about. That's very common in community colleges. They frequently lack the skills in planning, managing time, studying, and test taking. High school, unfortunately, does not always prepare them for what needs to be done in colleges. And when you have a very prescribed curriculum and you have very prescribed activities that need to take place, that's easier to follow. That doesn't even exist all the time. But when you go to college, you're adults. We expect you to achieve that. That's not reality. And fortunately, community colleges have learned that a long time ago and now are starting to put, more than starting, have created orientation programs and a variety of other efforts to help students understand what it's like to be a college student. And that's a major issue that we'll talk about later in terms of transition from high school to college. And many of the students have not done well in high school before. Why are you here? Well, I heard I have to come here to get a job. My parents said I had to go. My grandmother said I have to go. So I'm here. My pastor said I had to go. But they're not necessarily the best students. Now, some students are. And they come to community colleges because it's cheaper. I save money. It's close to home. I can live at home. I can get a job. But many of them are here because, I don't know what else to do. That's a factor if you want to keep them in to deal with. Okay, I've identified 3 principal paths to address underpreparedness of entering students. 1, improve skills while still in high school. 2, improve placement test scores. And 3, provide effective developmental education programs. First, improve skills in high school. The things that need to be done: align the high school and college curriculum and standards. Many years ago, when I worked in New Jersey, an English teacher invited me to her class and said the students were complaining about having to take a developmental course in English. And so I'm inviting you, Ed, to come down and talk to them about this test that you created, like I created, but all right. And so I did. And I asked them, how many of you play basketball? And, you know, a good sized number of the students played basketball. How many were on the team? Well, there was only one student on the team. I said, well, when you go to practice, you take one jump shot from the top of the key, go swish and say, yes, like Marv Albert, and walk off the court. I'd say, Coach, I'm ready. No, it's silly. Okay? All right, now how many of you have taken 4 years of English? Every student took 4 years of English in New Jersey. How many of you wrote an essay once a month? Nobody. How many of you wrote an essay once a year? Nobody in the class wrote an essay once a year. The average was maybe 3 or 4 essays the whole year. And that was in English classes, rarely outside of English. And by the way, that's happening too often in courses other than English in college. But what do college faculty expect students to do? English 101. Forget developmental. College English 101, whatever you call it in Alabama. You have to write an essay regularly, repeatedly. It's English 101, but it's writing, and more writing. Those of you English professors know what I'm talking about. Anybody who works in community college. That's a huge gap. You expect to develop it by osmosis? The stars are going to teach you how to do that? You have to do it. Like many things in life, you have to do things before you're able to learn how to do it well. And that's just in English. It's true in mathematics. In New Jersey, we raised the proficiency requirements for high school graduation. You had to have 3 years of math. So what happened? Intermediate algebra was taught over 2 years. You had 3 years of math. Okay, provide feedback to schools on performance of high school graduates on test scores and college performance. Give them feedback. How did you do on the placement tests? How did you do on the ACT? Make sure they understand, faculty and administrators, how your students are doing and how they do in college. And that's a great opportunity for dialogue, but not from the top-down approach, from a shared peer discussion and sharing for improvement with the goal of improvement. Develop joint efforts to smooth the transition from high school to college. Many things can be done about that. Working with the counselors to help them to understand what the ACT is about, what the placement test is about, what college requirements are about, what general education, answer a lot of that. There are some districts now offering, and I'll talk about this later, a program called College Success or the equivalent in the high school instead of at the college level. So that maybe your career course that's taught in junior or senior in high school becomes a clear, help the students have a clear understanding or much clearer understanding of what college is about. So you get them to not just show up in class, show up at the campus saying, what do you mean I have to take a placement test? What is that about? All right, the second thing is to talk about how to improve your placement test scores. Now, in Alabama, you require the ACT. It's exciting to provide that opportunity. You give feedback. But you'll also have a need, and we'll talk more about this later, for placement test scores. Some students will come, they haven't taken the ACT because they graduated years ago. Community colleges, the average age is about 28, 29. That's very different from many universities where the average age is 18 or 19, right out of high school. So develop pre-assessment activities to inform the students about the placement test ahead of time. not just when they show up on your campus. Prepare them for the test. Help them to prepare. Sample items. You can design your website. Increasingly, students are using electronic versions of catalogs. Create a website as if that's the way to help students to do it, although there's no one way to do that. Most students entering a community college have little understanding of what is expected of them by the college, including what the placement test is about or what's on it. About 75% of students report not preparing for a placement test. And almost 3/4 of those students would advise others to do them. Okay, I didn't, but my sister, I got to tell her she has to do this. Well, it'd be nice if the college took a lead in helping the students do that, and even better, to work with the local high schools to do that. And 2/3 of community colleges do not realize their remedial courses do not count for credit, what's called institutional credit. So it looks like credit, counts in your GPA, but it doesn't count, and it counts for financial aid, but it doesn't count for getting a degree. So that means if you need 60 credits and you take 12 credits developmental education, you need 72 to graduate. That takes it longer. The notion of a 2-year college, as has been asked several times of me, is no. The definition now is how many students graduate within 3 years. Very few students graduate in 2 years. And by the way, that's not only true for community colleges. The standard now is 5 years, even if we have to pay for our sons and daughters for those 5 years. Pre-assessment activities, very important in helping students to prepare for tests. Now, helping to prepare for tests is not merely to improve the test scores. That's a factor also, it's a goal, but it's also to improve the skills. Mathematics in particular, where the students do especially poorly, it's like foreign language. Don't use it, you lose it. And students who haven't taken any math in years, even recent high school graduates, may not have taken math for 2 or more years, are suddenly asked questions about arithmetic and algebra. They may have known it, they may have learned it, but they've forgotten it. Pre-assessment activities should be an important part of the placement process so you don't have as many students doing this poorly. Work with the local high schools to improve the transition. Align writing and math skills. Practice placement tests. Use the result to provide feedback, provide information on college expectations, and offer career and guidance classes. Things I mentioned. Okay, second, explain why the test is important. Too often in the past, community colleges have sent a letter congratulating the students for being admitted. And your next step is go take a placement test. Here's the phone number, here's the location, make an appointment. No, it's not sufficient. We make an assumption the students know what you're talking about. They don't, as I've said. Provide encouraging information and reassuring principle descriptions of the test. Wallace State in Hansville has developed an excellent orientation video to help students to understand the transition and the need for placement tests, what it's all about. And that leads into, which is on their website, as well as the students showed up who haven't seen the website. And other kinds of social media can be used. That helps the students identify where you can get sample questions, where you can take a pretest, where you can practice, where you can develop your skills. And I'll talk about elaborating on the way to develop skills in a little while. Use multiple methods, as I've said in here. Inform the students' placement test impact on degree so that they know that this is an important test. There's a balance here. If you don't want to provide them with information that says, look, if you don't do well, you ain't making it here. No, that's scaring them. Anxiety does not help students to do better. But on the other hand, apathy is just as bad. And if the students don't care, and you get down to the point and their friend says, I gotta go, and they fill in the blanks without caring what the answers are, you're going to get equally poor results. So having them a balance, the message is important, positive. We are here to help you. We've accepted you to the college. We care that you succeed at our college. And part of success is to take a placement test so that we can help you to take the beginning courses you most need to succeed in college. We're not punishing you. You can't do arithmetic and you want to sign up for calculus. That's not helping you. The test is to help you decide what are your skills, where's the best place for you to begin, so that it increases the likelihood that you can be successful. How can students get better scores? Prepare for the placement test helps a lot. Develop preparation materials, including sample questions. Develop summer bridge programs, sometimes called boot camps. Now, boot camps, summer bridge programs can be used in at least two different ways. One, it could help the transition when students go from high school to college, almost regardless of what their skills are. Some students can start summer school. But the principal reason is to help them prepare for the placement test, or they've done poorly on the placement test and give them a chance to study and restudy the skills, especially, as I said, in mathematics, so that you then retest them at the end of summer school and the students get better scores. And in fact, a number of places, Shelton State has demonstrated significant places, and a lot of colleges across the country are using summer bridge programs or boot camps to significantly decrease the number of students needing developmental education by increasing their scores. Sometimes they only miss by a few points, and the issue of a few points I'm going to discuss later on this morning as well. And reinforce learning through learning centers. So even if the students don't do well, some students are pretty close to doing well, and there are multiple ways of doing it. One of them is to put them in learning centers with crash intensive courses, and then start the program, start the courses with late starting classes. A number of community colleges are moving to starting late starting courses for those who are close and need to improve their skills, and then take the developmental course or the college course. Okay, and I think I've said enough about bridge programs and boot camps. These are the kinds of things that are helpful for doing that. I think you got the idea. The third issue is to provide effective developmental education. So the first is to improve the skills in the first place before they demonstrate lack of skills. Second is to improve the placement test scores. And the third is, okay, you've tried those two things and you still have students coming in who need help and assistance to be ready for college courses. More than 80% of all community colleges and universities offer developmental education. So this is not a new, rare thing in higher education. Developmental education provides a gap, that bridges the gap between students who lack the skills, are underprepared in the skills necessary for college success, and providing both access and quality. In fact, colleges recognize that the opportunity to post-secondary education requires addressing the underpreparation of many entering students. I would argue that without an effective, comprehensive developmental education program, colleges will lower standards. If you have half your students coming in not having the skills you need, you can't flunk half the students out. So you put them in developmental ed, and then the faculty member is faced with a serious number of students who don't have the skills, and you're trying to remediate them in one semester, maybe a year. And what happens? They hold to their standards, and the dean wants to know, why did so many students fail your course? What's wrong with you? And we don't announce we're lowering standards. We just cut out certain content. We might not finish the program, the course, the curriculum, the syllabus. That's lowering standards as well. Hunter Boylan gives, I think, is a very good definition. Developmental education is the integration of academic courses and support services. Academic courses and support services. Without both, it's not effective. Guided by the principles of adult learning and development. Now, why does he put the word adult in? Because teaching reading for adults is not the same as teaching reading for third graders. And people who come from a system that's their experience need to understand that adults, if they can't read, have all kinds of issues going on about, you can't read? And that needs to be taken into account, not only in the classroom, but with support services. NAED, the National Association of Developmental Education, has a much longer definition. Again, you can read that. We don't need to go into it. It's a more detailed things. The goals of developmental education that NAED has defined, I think, are important. To preserve and make possible educational opportunity for each post-secondary learner. Develop in each learner the skills and attitudes. Notice, not just skills, but attitudes necessary for the attainment of academic career and life goals, and increasingly that's true. To ensure proper placement by assessing each learner's level of preparedness for college coursework. To enhance the retention of students. If students are dropping out, they're not going to complete. And if the goal is to get more students to get certificates and degrees, you can't let them, it's not a point of letting them, we have to find ways to make sure they stay in school. And to promote the continued development and application of cognitive and affective learning theories, because both are important in learning. Is developmental education a new phenomenon? No. The first institution of higher education in the United States was Harvard, founded in 1636. Interestingly enough, Harvard was the first college or university to offer remedial developmental education beginning in the 17th century. Why? Because they found that too many students coming out of the high schools were not prepared for college. Duh. It's not a new phenomenon. Why does that matter? Development education has been an integral part of higher education for a very long time. Some people lately are talking about, well, maybe we should get rid of developmental education. It's not a new phenomenon. It's been around a long time, and if you do that, you're going to be lower in standards. What do I mean by community developmental education? Mandatory assessment. So you assess the students when they come in. There are exceptions. If you already have a college degree, some students go back to school and to learn about computers, for example. Well, you don't need to give a placement test to them. They already have a degree. If you have already passed your college and English and math courses, you don't have to assess them again. Although there may be something about assessing students who've been out of school a long time, who took a course 5, 10, 15 years ago, and now they want to go into a new field requiring them to have a high level of math. Well, again, you ask the question, well, maybe the rule says I don't have to, but is that the best way to start? Or should we find out where you are in terms of your math skills before we dump you, and I use the term deliberately, into a course you're not prepared? Mandatory placement. Many years ago, I wrote that if you're going to assess the students and not place them, it's basically a moral issue. Why are you bothering to do that? You know that the students cannot do well, and then you let them take whatever you want, whatever they want. By the way, when I say whatever they want, that's an issue that needs to be improved in our colleges. Incredibly, the students who need the help the most, and I'll say this repeatedly, the students who need the help the most are the least likely to seek it. That leads to a whole bunch of things like structure, orientation, advising, etc. If I have two students in front of me that otherwise seem to have equal skills and affective issues, and you're an adult learner out of school at 25 or above, that student is going to be highly motivated. But that student wants to start at the beginning because they're all bright students here, and I don't think I can compete. That's an advising issue that most advisors know. So you're not sure, you put the student in the higher course. The 18-year-old, they're proud of what they've accomplished. Good. But the gap between what they think they can know and can do and what they actually can know and do is usually a lot broader, and they tend to be less motivated. Again, this is not, I don't mean to create a stereotype. It's based on experience of working with hundreds and thousands of students. Developmental education includes instruction, multiple levels. Not try to do everything in one semester. Support services, such as counseling and advising, tutoring, learning centers, study skills, college success courses, and learning communities. Learning community, by the way, is where you put a group of students together. Let's say English students who need developmental English with students who need developmental reading. And you work together with, say, an advisor or a counselor to help the students to get through the verbal skills. There are multiple models of learning communities, but the key is you're helping the students to create an esprit de corps where we're in this together, to work together, to improve together, to succeed together. And anything you do should be evaluation. Mandatory assessment. All first-time in college students are assessed in reading, writing, and math at a level needed for beginning college courses. Additional students and skills will be assessed as needed. That's an individual decision to be made. Exceptions include students who have a college degree, and I talked about that already. Mandatory placement. All entering students receive counseling and advising. This is difficult. But it doesn't have to be a 1-hour psychotherapy session with a trained counselor for every individual student. You can do group work, you can identify priorities, you can take a look at students who especially are high risk, you can do a variety of opportunities, and you can do things over time. Sometimes colleges try the university model. And by the way, if you have a son or daughter go to a private university and many public universities, you know it's mandatory to show up for orientation, and the parents have to go too, and usually spend 3 days on campus. So when people say to me, "Are you kidding me? How can we possibly do this? Because we have all these thousands of students." Well, if you do it the day before classes begin, of course you can't do it. So start testing the students in high school. Start using advising systems early late in the spring, before they graduate even. Spread it over time. Do it in group kinds of things. You can do a lot of things if you plan it out well. If the goal is there, you'll find a solution. If you don't want to find a solution, you'll find a reason not to find a solution. Multiple factors are assessed, and I'm going to talk about this hard. One of the principal things that people have complained about placement tests is that they're not predictive, and I'll talk about that later. They're not supposed to be predictive. But the thing that is most likely to happen is people use the simple and what I consider dirty way. Give the test, have the computer print out what courses you should take. Nobody sees the student, and they're told that. And then you wonder why, wow, this student didn't seem to be appropriately placed. Maybe they didn't need that course, or maybe they did need a developmental course, but they weren't given it, because no test is perfect. And one score on one test is totally inadequate for making placement decisions, frankly, whether it's a community college, university, or life. I mean, could you imagine that the New York Giants, who played like, I don't want to even talk about it last night, actually selected people on the basis of the Wonderlic IQ test? They use a lot of variables. And look at how successful NFL teams, baseball teams are for trying to select which players actually succeed. The outcomes are amazing, not good. Placement, and so try to do the same thing with college students. It's going to be errors, but we cannot do it by skin color, by eye color, by height, or anything else, or by one score on one placement test. Placement is tied directly to prerequisite and registration system and supported by a computerized system. So when I hear, well, the student took the test, met with the advisor, we gave them recommendations, and they didn't follow it. It's the student's fault. No, because it's very easy to tie the recommendations to the registration system. So if a student who cannot do algebra signs up and is recommended to take a developmental course in algebra, signs up for the calculus course, that's the student's fault? No, that's the institution's fault. It's incredibly easy to tie registration to the computerized system needs for registration. Multiple levels needed because of the broad range of skills. Literally, students come to our colleges who cannot do arithmetic. Literally, cannot read beyond the 5th or 6th grade level, sometimes lower. Institutional credit, support without lowering standards. Institutional credit gives a feeling that you're accomplishing something. It ties into the GPA. It ties into the sense that I've accomplished, I got good grades. It ties into financial aid. But you don't lower standards by replacing college courses with it. That's the balance. Outcomes of highest course in each skill area should equal entering skills of corresponding college courses. Why is that important? Sometimes I'll go to a college and the students, 85% of the students will pass developmental ed, and then I look at 45% pass the college course. What's going on here? Well, what's going on is the people teaching developmental have different standards, lower standards, than the faculty who are teaching college courses. So you set it up as the goal, which I just described, and then you check on the data to see whether it's working or not. The goal of developmental ed is to develop the skills that are needed to get in and be successful in college courses. When there's that huge gap, that's not what's happening. Support services. And there are services and programs. let me not read this, but point out that it's more than academic skills are needed to be successful. And it's more than study skills and time management skills and things like that. It includes motivation, perseverance. Business likes to use the word grit. I love that word. You don't give up. You keep going. And in mathematics, it's especially. You don't get it right away, I can't do it. And my English teacher said she couldn't do it either. Terrible messages. I'm left brain or right brain. I forgot which is which. No, you have to work at these things. And as students need to understand that. So there's a listing of support services, and almost every college has all of these things. The one I want to point out is orientation. If you don't have a good, effective orientation program that helps the students understand what I've been talking about to make the transition, you can't be successful. You can't be a good college as far as I'm concerned. Everybody needs to be offering these kinds of services. Advising and counseling, increasingly, that's becoming a focus, and I'm going to talk more about that later. Tutoring. Supplemental instruction, by the way, is a form of tutoring. Instead of going to a learning center where you have, by the way, a learning center is a place where you do tutoring and have some other kinds of software where you can you can do your homework, you can practice, you can see somebody for some additional help. Supplemental instruction is a particular kind of tutoring where you have a tutor in the class with the students. And frequently that tutor then meets with the students outside the class in an organized group way. Again, back to working together. Somewhat related to learning community, but somewhat different too. And as board members, you don't need to know the details about this, but just to raise the issue that people can and should be doing these kinds of things. Student success course. What is a student success course? A student success course is like an elongated orientation. If orientation is important to help students to succeed, then trying to do that in 2 hours or 3 hours is like pouring water into a sieve. And there's a lot of research that's shown that people tend to forget something like 80% in the first hour. Well, think about going to college, having a 2-hour lecture on orientation. They're not going to remember that. So a college success course says, these issues are important. We need time to do that. It's becoming almost universal to create college success courses at community colleges. And many four-year universities are doing it too. So you elongate the kinds of discussions that take place, the kind of teaching that take place, with a behavioral orientation. I worked at a college once to evaluate their Title III program, and the lowest rate, lower than math, was the percentage of students getting a C or better in the college success course. It's like, what are you guys doing? This is supposed to be the course that helps students to succeed. So I met with the psychology professors. They were all the ones who taught it. And their emphasis was on teaching learning theory. As a psychologist, knowing learning theory is certainly important. But that's not the main focus of college success courses. It's behavioral, starting with simple. Can you take a tour? Do you know where the library is? Do you know about how to get financial aid? Do you know how, and in fact, I recommend that completing a FAFSA form should be an important part of the curriculum. If you've done it already, you've done your homework, fine, move on. But if you haven't, go fill it out. Well, I don't think I'm eligible to fill it out. You'd be amazed. And perhaps providing help in doing that. And learning labs are like putting these things together. A place where students can go to get a variety of services. Evaluation. Multiple variables, including course completion, success in subsequent courses, retention, GPA, satisfaction, and increasingly college completion. Now, I've left that out because I think college completion is the goal for going to college and evaluating where the college is doing. But I'm uncomfortable evaluating developmental ed on completion of college because the gap between the first year and 3 years later is too great to say, well, it's developmental ed's fault that's happening. But the others, if you complete developmental ed, I want to know how you've done in successive courses, for example. And if you drop out of school in the first year, then developmental ed is an issue. Possible consequences. I'm not sure that I haven't covered this already. Many students will enroll in courses for which they are not prepared. Faculty and students likely to be frustrated. Why do I say faculty? Those of you who teach know what it's like to have 25, 30 students in a class, and they range across the board from 5th grade readers to college ready readers. How do you teach that? Which students do you focus on? What's the emphasis do you do? And so what happens? You teach that grand middle. And so the students who need the help don't frequently get the help, at least not in that classroom, maybe outside. And the students who, what do I need to cover this stuff for? I know it already. They're not challenged. That's another reason for developmental ed, to make it more homogeneous. Everybody doesn't have to be alike. I don't mean to imply that. And you don't have to make it so narrow that you have 16 different levels. That's ridiculous. 2 is more than sufficient for developmental education. Standards will be lowered. I mentioned that already. You'll have low retention rates because the students can't handle the courses. And of course, low graduation rates. Learning is inadequate. And the students, the college, the businesses, and community suffer. Well, I understand the students, and I can understand the college, especially if people are looking, increasingly they will be, at how your college is doing. But the community, but the businesses, think about, and I understand that many board members are in business, think about hiring people, and they have a college degree from X community college in Alabama. And you find that, look, Madam President, half the students can't do the skills that you just gave a degree to. What is that all about? That's what I mean by lowering standards. That's what I mean by impacting the community and the businesses. This is not just students in college. But we're not doing as well as we should. We need to reform. How can we improve movement and success through developmental ed? How can we improve success rates, especially in mathematics? How can we improve retention and graduation rates? What policies need to change? And what practices seem to work best, and for whom? Okay, what works in developmental education and student success? Early. The key word there is early. John Gardner in South Carolina years ago created the first year experience. Well, that's nice, and that was for the University of South Carolina, which many universities picked up, and basically said, if you don't get the students early, you won't get to them because they won't be there. For community colleges, first year is too long. You can't wait for them to start their second year. You're going to lose as many as half your students in 1 year. Half. And so you can't wait. Quarter the first semester and half by the end of 1 year. So you start with the first semester. No, first month. First day, in fact, I should add, before you start, as I've talked about the transition from high school to college. You have to help these students overcome our own prejudices that, well, if you want to go to college, you should be prepared, and you should know what to do, and you should, etc. That is not where our students are now. We need to step up and provide them with help before they start college and right at the beginning. And I'll talk about that more later. High expectations. If you don't expect a student to succeed, they ain't going to. My wife's an English teacher, so if she watches the YouTube later, I'm going to get in trouble for saying ain't, but you understand. Structure. The notion that students can handle these things and learn how to do it by themselves is not effective. It's been proven over and over again. They need to be placed in structured programs where they're required to do these things, or they're set up in such a narrow, guided way that they now know what to do. The worst thing you can do to a student is say, go to the learning lab and work on it by yourself. A, they won't do it, and B, if they get there, they won't know what to do. Nobody gives them feedback. It's like a student writing an essay in high school and no one reads it, or in college for that matter. Interaction with college faculty and staff is key. Many students are afraid of the professors. So that means the faculty, you can't wait and say, well, I'm here. I had office hours. They didn't show up. That's true. That's what the research says. You're here most of the time. Students don't show up. Okay, so do you accept that? Or do you say, okay, what can I do to get the students to come to my office? That's a different attitude than lecturing as if everybody is a Harvard student. Interaction with college faculty and staff is key. College success courses have covered that. Effective instruction is obvious, and we could spend a whole week on what that means. Prerequisites enforced, I mentioned that. Effective support services and learning communities. So I've covered all of those things. Those are the things that work in improving student success and improving developmental education. There are 3 more recent developments that I want to emphasize. Guided pathways, advising, accelerated learning, and reform mathematics. And essence of time, I'm going to skip some of the details. But improved advising guided pathways. A number of places, including Susan Burrow at Central Alabama, recently purchased a software program that's going to provide guided pathways. What does that mean? Let's go back to structure. Community colleges, in order to attempt to reach out to as many students as possible, have provided what people are calling a cafeteria approach to taking courses, okay? It's not as bad as, here's the catalog, good luck. But from the student perspective, it might as well be, because there are so many courses they can take. Look at a college catalog. It's incredible how many programs are offered. It's incredible how many courses they're offered. And as B.F. Skinner wrote several years ago about American society, we have so many choices that it leads to a lack of freedom. It leads to chaos. And that's what's happening for many students coming to our colleges. They don't get the advising frequently, or they don't get effective advising, and even when they get advising, it's like, here's what your major is. I don't know. What do you want to major in? I don't know. Well, what course should you take? Well, that's why I'm here to talk to you about. So what's happening is the colleges are coming up with, in their software technology, they're helping to do that, where the student comes in and with an advisor creates a student education plan. And with the student education plan, it lays out what the courses are necessary to get that degree. Because there are students who not only don't know what to do, but sometimes when they don't know what to do and they're good students, they could end up getting 80, 90, over 100 credits. That's a waste of time, it's a waste of state funds, et cetera, et cetera. So if the goal here of structured advising with a pathway system is to create a student education plan and then follow the students up with advising using technology. So I want to sign up and take an economics course. Okay, but that's not in your career plan. So why are you doing it? Now, it may well be, and I picked one that you guys might debate me, say, well, economics is important for everybody to learn. Okay, it's not like you can't go back to your advisor. So it forces you to circle back and communicate and say, okay, that's an interesting thing. It doesn't mean you're locked in. It doesn't, and the first day you come in, you have to pick a major. No, it allows for change, but it forces the student to come back and talk to a counselor and advisor. And that's where the structure comes in. And that means thinking, it means communicating, it means making good decisions before you make bad decisions. And that's a growing thing in higher education, especially in community colleges. And at least at Central Alabama, they haven't done it yet, so when I come in the spring, that's going to be high on the topic agenda of say, okay, Susan, that's what's happening here. Excuse me, Dr. Burrow, now you're president, I have to be careful. Okay, so skipping the next one, which kind of gives a little direction of what I just said, if it works. Okay? What's happening here? Besides the obvious, it's not moving. Guys in the media center, hello. Oh, it went, okay. So, the goal is to increase program graduation rates by providing structured curriculum advising. I just described that, so we'll move on. Oh, there's one aspect of that that's important, and it's the term meta-major. If you're in nursing, it's a very prescribed program. If you're in STEM, science, technology, engineering, et cetera, math, it's a very prescribed. Having worked at a university that the major program was engineering, and even architecture, although certainly in engineering more than architecture, you had courses you had to take. It was like you almost had no choice of what it would be. Well, community colleges are trying to help students develop what's your interests, what are you good at, what do you want to do with your life, et cetera. And so to make it more helpful to get out of the chaos, structured programs. But I'm not sure, the student says. So if you take courses, then you change your mind, and you change your mind a couple times, a not uncommon experience, does that mean I have to back up? Well, if you decide to go into engineering and you haven't taken the appropriate math courses, science courses, yeah, you have to back up and do that. How can we develop a way that allows the students to take courses, but it'll still count toward multiple majors? And what people are coming up with is called meta majors. So they're combining different courses, and this means the faculty rewrites the curriculum so that the kinds of skills that are included in these meta majors are appropriate for multiple kinds of majors. And so it's a way of addressing the students who don't know exactly what they want to do, with the reality that's what the students are bringing to us. Okay, now, the battery's running low, what's going on here? All right, good. Accelerated learning. This is a longer phenomenon. It's been going on, developed at the Community College of Baltimore County, who decided that students were taking too many developmental courses. So they took the highest level, the students in the highest level developmental, pulled them out, put them in the college course, and say, okay, we're going to, you really, based on your scores, and also the way you were in your curriculum, you should take the highest level developmental course in English. We're going to let you take the college English, but we're going to require you to take 1 additional hour a week with the same instructor, so that we think you have the skills, if we provide you with extra structure and support and an hour a week extra, that you can succeed, and that they demonstrated very successful. So there are different kinds of models along that line. Okay. I didn't mean to embarrass you, I apologize. Paired or combined courses, and an example of that. Compressed developmental sequence, was kind of, you take the courses together, both at the same time, or you take the curriculum. One of the colleges in Texas, for example, took the 2 math courses and offered it the same semester. People are taking that model called link courses and looking at, so the students take the math courses they need in 1 semester, because what happens? The students pass developmental ed, this is what they were finding, then they say, phew, I got through this, I don't want to take any more math. So then when they go on to the next course, they've forgotten so much of it, and they end up back. Those of us looking at the literature, and that's one of the concerns in K-12. Well, what happens over the summer if you don't do any reading? So we're encouraging students to do more reading. Same kinds of things in developmental ed and community colleges. Mainstreaming with supports. You put more students into the college course, but you require supplemental instruction, extra tutoring, the learning center. That becomes a part of the curriculum. Again, structure is important. Again, students need it to help the most, or least likely to seek it. So it's not like we offer it. We offer it as crap. We offer it means you don't really care. You must put the students in a structured, mandatory assistance. Oh, wow, we got to catch up now. Huh? I apologize. No, okay, I skipped the one I wanted. All right, let's go back and I'll talk and try to find it at the same time. Reform mathematics. Nationally, 60 to 70% of community college students need at least 1 developmental math course before enrolling in college credit course. 60 to 70%. In my college in California, 50% of the entering students were not proficient in arithmetic. Mathematics is a major problem. And at the same time, Gates and many other people are looking for quality people who can do STEM, mathematics kinds of activities. Nationally, 80% of students never get out of developmental math. They never go past that. And college algebra is arguably the single most difficult obstacle to student success. So there are 2 major efforts to change what's going on in mathematics. And I don't know if I can find this at this point. I'm not sure we need to do this. So I'll explain it. One is by the Carnegie Institute in California, and it's called Statway and Quantway. What they're saying is, and involves math people at the K-12 level as well as the community college and university level, what they're saying is students don't necessarily need college algebra for their careers. Statistics offers an alternative way. If you want to go into engineering and many accounting, you need calculus. Okay, so college algebra is appropriate. But for many students, quantitative analysis is an appropriate, acceptable alternative. Statistics is an appropriate statistical, appropriate math course to take for many careers. So the University of Texas has come up with a program called Math Pathways, and Carnegie has come up with Statway and Quantway. I'm not going to talk in details about that. Those are things that colleges need to look at. It means the math people have to accept, maybe I shouldn't be teaching college algebra. I should be teaching some alternative math. But it also means, and arguably the single most difficult thing to do, is to get the university math faculty to accept these courses for college transfer. Because if we make the changes at the community college level, and the students then go to transfer, and they say, oh no, you don't have college algebra. Even if we take you in, we're going to make you take it anyway. You're not helping the students. So this is a major reform effort. We're not even close to completing that. Okay, and some of these things I've covered already. High expectations, policies and procedures that work. Intrusive, mandatory. If I say it again, you'll throw something at me. Often it's the students who most need the help, ditto. Engagement, students need to be involved with the college. The one I haven't mentioned, I will now, eliminate late registration. John Roosh was a famous person from the University of Texas, still teaching. I think he's in his, he's even older than me, so you know he's old. Said he's looking for the community college that says it's okay to register up until Thanksgiving. What happens when you have late registration? The purpose is, I need the money. I need the enrollments. I need the FTE. So you let students, what's the message? Don't worry about orientation. Don't worry about taking developmental ed. Don't worry about meeting the requirements. They'll let you in because they need the money. And even if students don't know you need the money, they know you let them in. What happens is, think about the faculty member who has 2 students show up in their class. It's the second week of school. In the first week of school, the English teacher frequently has given an essay, so they get an understanding of what the students are doing. Math teachers frequently give a quiz, just to get some feel. I know they have placement scores, but I want to see the students myself and get them to do the work, to show it, rather than answer a multiple choice question. Get a greater diagnostic of what's going on with the students. Okay, and then you've explained the curriculum. You explain the syllabus and the requirements for the course, and when the final exam and midterm exam, and whether you're having a midterm, blah, blah, blah. And now Joe Smith shows up and says, I'm sorry, I missed last week. What's this course about? What does the faculty member do? Well, of course, the faculty member tries to help the student. Well, they can't do it right in class there, so they have the student come. Sometimes they come, sometimes they don't. But they have to stop then and explain it. Then, do they give an essay or a math quiz to the students? Sometimes yes, sometimes no, on their own time. The bottom line is, the faculty member is held up in teaching, and the other students in class, what is this? I come on time, I start at the beginning, and this guy comes late, and he gets treated like this. And so the wrong message, it's not only no message, the wrong message goes out. No big deal. It holds up the whole process. Eliminating late registration is a problem because you do want the enrollments, you do want the money. Can you begin late starting classes, which a lot of students do? And sometimes, heck, you've been recruiting these students since January, and they can't get their act together by end of August. Maybe it's better they start in February or January. In fact, the data shows the strongest students, the ones who go to summer school. Because they're making a commitment to start beforehand. They're motivated. They want to succeed. The next, the ones who start in the fall. Obviously, the weakest ones are the ones in spring. They can't even get their act together to start in fall. So why are you encouraging that with late registration? It's a terrible thing to do. I understand the money issue. Doesn't mean you have to take this and immediately eliminate it. Come up with plans, and there are alternatives that people are doing that. Okay, I already said about early. Prerequisites, exit criteria. Covered that already. Recognize that at-risk students need structure. I've said that repeatedly. Student success is not left to chance. The institution plays a role in stepping in. Affective and cognitive. Repeat that. Affective and cognitive. Active interaction with faculty and staff. Multiple programs and services to serve. And go back to structure. Oh yeah, we have an advising program. We have a learning center. We have a tutoring program. Does anybody go? I worked at a community college in Arizona for a grant that I wrote for them. 'em. And it was to improve student success. And we talked about orientation. And they said, oh, we already have mandatory orientation. So I said, how many students attended? 24. 24 students attended your full orientation. How many students started? About 900. So you have mandatory orientation and 24 out of 900 showed up? We sent a letter. This is where the institution has to step up. And so I said, you want to make it, well, they asked, how can we make them? I said, don't let them register unless they go to orientation. Create a 0 credit mandatory course that you have to take, put it in the system, the computer will handle it. You don't show up, you can't register. And let them know ahead of time. And when they show up, you sign them in. They went from 24 to 800 and something, 840 in one semester. Structure and making the students do what the institution wants them to do to help them. Sometimes they don't know what they need. Okay. Student-centered environment, very important. Make sure that the focus on what the student needs, not merely on what the institution needs. Developmental education is essential for meeting the mission of Alabama community colleges. Access and standards of quality, and increasingly outcomes in terms of certificates and degrees. Developmental education must be seen as an integral part of the college's strategic plan, supported by the administration, the faculty, the staff, the students, and the community, and in this case, the Board of Trustees for Alabama. What are some possible state actions? Okay. Identify obstacles to completion. Not that I expect the board to do this, but the board and the chancellor can work with the task forces similar to the ones you're doing for developmental education. What are the obstacles to completion? The factors that correlate with student success, and high and low performing institutions to inform statewide goals for community colleges. And what are the graduation rates? What do you want the graduation rates to be? And I should use the term program certificates. Not everybody gets a degree, and completing a certificate program can be, for many students, very important as well. Phase in common statewide placement standards. Across the country, colleges, states, even when the colleges use the same tests, which I understand happens in Alabama, you've been using the compass, have different cut scores. Why should college English be that different that you can't have the same, or at least very close, common cut scores for placement in developmental education? Phase in common statewide placement over time, aligning remedial work with credit-bearing courses to accelerate progress toward a completion of degree. Improve collaboration K-12 because you want to work, and initially I talked about that, you want to try and increase the skills before they start college. Use state-level data system to track student outcomes in remedial courses. It's not enough to take the courses. How do they do? Those are what I call outcomes. Encourage more Alabama colleges to join Achieving the Dream. Achieving the Dream is a national reform initiative to encourage institutional improvement, assist communication and collaboration, share issues and solutions nationally, and increase professional development. And for the record, I do not get paid for this advertisement. I just think it's a great program. That's why I've been involved for 11 years now, and it's working in many ways for many colleges. So I encourage the chancellor and the board to encourage more colleges to do that. Might need some help. And last night at dinner with Annette Cook, who's a super lady here in Alabama, we discussed another thing I want to add that I didn't have time to put in the slides, and that is assistance in getting grants. Many colleges would like to have grants. A number of colleges have gotten grants, but it's a burdensome issue. It's a burdensome process. Where are the grants? How do I get to them? If the state agency provided some guidance, maybe a person in the central office, and this, again, I have not spent a lot of time, but thinking about this last night and this morning, provide some assistance to where are the grants? Where can I apply? And those of you who have written grants know that there's a lot of parts of grants that are essentially the same, what we'll call boilerplate. So you put in your own demographics, your own needs, your own goals, but other parts you can provide professional development and get more colleges. I know that Alabama, like a lot of other places, are concerned about where is this going to come from in terms of funding. So take advantage of foundations and the federal government, TRIO programs, Title III programs, etc., that can provide significant funding to help carry out the goals that what you're trying to do. Okay, at this point, it's part B. And do you want me to keep going on assessment and placement? Okay. Let's define assessment. Different meanings, and I've put 3. The one we're going to be focusing on, that's why the asterisk there, is assessment and advising and placement for entering students in entering college courses. There's also a thing called classroom assessment techniques, which we won't be talking about, but in fact, faculty should know about, written by Claros and Angelo. These are teaching techniques. Those of you who are familiar with that know the term, for example, 1-minute exercise, 1-minute assessment. And that's where a teacher at the end of a lecture or the end of a class might say, okay, take out a piece of paper and tell me what you learned in this class, or tell me what the thing is most fuzzy in your mind. Tell me what I wish I had more time to ask a question. And it provides feedback to the instructor, who then collects them, sees, oh, we tried to discuss this concept and half the class didn't know what I was talking about. Okay, start the next class with doing that. So it provides feedback to the faculty member to reinforce and sometimes reteach the concept the students learn. That's not what we're talking about, but very helpful. And the third is outcomes assessment. And that's what SACS and other the feds are looking at in terms of graduation rates, program completion rates, retention rates. Again, we're not talking about that, but also a very important topic that needs to be discussed. Okay, there's also a difference between assessment and testing. There we go. Testing is the use of an instrument or tool, such as a placement test to assess student learning and other attributes or characteristics. Assessment is broader. It takes the test and adds other factors, what I'll call multiple factors or multiple variables, to understand what's going on with the student. And they're frequently non-cognitive kinds of things, affective kinds of things, beyond how well they read, write, or do mathematics. And then there's the assessment process. First, you have an application, and this is pretty common. You do pre-assessment activities. That's not common, but should be. You take the placement test. That's pretty common in most places, and it's true in Alabama, except with exceptions for students who do well in the ACT. Then they go with counseling advising. That's common, but not universal, in the sense that the community colleges offer counseling or advising, and I'm using for purposes today interchangeably, but that doesn't mean that the students who need it actually get it. And then there's registration and enrollment, which is essential. Counseling and advising is arguably the most important ingredient because it pulls everything together. It's the difference between a test score and a computer printout of how the students have done, and actually putting together a more total, more encompassing, holistic approach to understanding what skills and attributes the student has and what they need to do. And it requires training. You know, people talk about faculty advising. Well, you teach so you can advise. No, that's not sufficient. For some people, yes. But for the overwhelming majority, they need some training in what test scores mean, what assessment means, what attributes they need. And you can't just teach English and know all the things about financial aid. You don't have to know how to fill out a FAFSA form, but you need to know where to send the student if they need help with that. It requires knowledge of academic courses, programs, and requirements, knowledge of support systems, and requires significant skills in relating and understanding students. You can't be an advisor if you don't establish good rapport with students. And that may seem like an obvious statement, but in fact, we may sometimes make the assumption that faculty who teach can be good advisors. Not true. Okay, what is a test? Now, this is important things I'm going to talk about. It's a sample of behavior, products, or performance from a larger domain. Okay, let's say you have intermediate algebra. There are topics that a group of math people will say, these are the topics the student should learn. Well, there may be 50 topics in a syllabus for intermediate algebra. You can't have a test that's going to assess every item in that domain. But more than that, even if you could, one question is not going to be sufficient in terms of assessing whether the students know it or not. And now I'm going to go off on the aside and be a little bit critical. For many standardized tests, especially in K to 12, they try to do what I said cannot be done. They'll look at the syllabus, they'll define all the things in the domain, and then they'll have one question that covers almost all of the domain. And if those of you who have children in K to 12 and you get these scores, these computerized scores, and they have a bar, you know, there's a thick bar in the middle and then a narrow bar. Okay, those bars represent the potential true score of the student. That's number one. But number two, can you imagine what one item is going to do to assess whether the students can do an algebraic equation in a horizontal format versus a vertical format? It's borderline worthless, those diagnosis information. And that's a terrible statement to make. I say borderline because you can always get something out of it. But to expect parents to understand what that means, given what I just said, is hopeless. I'll say it. We can never ask students all of the possible test questions about arithmetic or any other topic. So we select a sample of problems to represent the important parts of the domain. When I talk about samples, we're into statistics, we're into probability, and you know, the mind, it's math, so it's scary for a lot of people, and it relates to political polling. Well, why don't we? I never got asked. They can't be real. Well, they are real. They're not always accurate, and sampling is a major issue as well as interpretation. And the factors involved with that are similar to the factors in making assessment decisions and placement decisions. What are some of the factors in selecting a test? Content is the most critical factor. If you don't have appropriate content, everything else falls apart. That's the kind of validity you need in developing a test. So if you have a test in reading, you have to have a test in reading. And I'm going to talk, not all of this, but in writing. If you give a multiple choice test in writing, many English faculty say, well, the only way I can really find out if the student can write is to ask them to write. No, it's not the only way. One could argue that it's the best way. However, it's still one question. And that assumes that the question you asked is appropriate and that it measures what it's supposed to measure. And it doesn't bring into other factors. So if you ask a question to get students to write on a topic that is politically sensitive, I'll let you define what that means. You'll have students writing things that are related to their own religion, philosophy, etc. You need to have a question that doesn't do that and yet requires the students to write. And if you ask them to write about their summer vacation, you get what's called a narrative. Narrative essays are good for high school. Even that's questionable nowadays. What college faculty are looking for expository writing. Take a position, defend it with good arguments while still using good mechanics of writing. And there's a difference between K-12 testing and higher education testing, and a difference between the curriculum of high school and college. We expect students to write expository essays, take a position, and defend it with arguments. Realistic arguments, not one based only on their head of what they think is going on in their fantasy world. Factors in selecting a placement test include criterion reference. And without going into great deal, criterion reference tests are based against standards, not against norms. I don't know if you've heard of the Lake Wobegon effect. About 15 years ago, a dentist in West Virginia was not happy with his daughter's performance. And when he looked at the district's test scores, found out that they were above average. And he said, this district is above average? And so he tried to find what that meant. And what he meant was that the district chose some other norm, some other comparison group that they were better in. And some districts you have to really search hard to find somebody, some other district that your own district is better in. That's what norm reference means. And it can be, but it doesn't have to be related to the kinds of standards that you expect. So a placement test for college should be based on judgment of experts, curriculum experts, combination of faculty, consensus, It's like a departmental exam versus an individual faculty member. You take a risk that that individual faculty is good at writing tests, where a departmental exam is in agreement with a consensus of what should be covered and at what standards. So criterion reference test is important in selection of tests. Discrimination, in this case I don't mean bias. I mean the ability to see what the student's scores, skills are across a continuum, because that's what the placement's going to be. Speediness. One of the best ways of determining how smart somebody is to speed up the test. Okay? So you have two tests. One, you got 3 hours to do it, and one you have an hour. What happens? The students who can do the same work in quicker time, what do we say? Someone gives an answer right away. Wow, that person's smart. That person's bright. And psychologists have found out that speed plays a role in determining intelligence. What we're trying to measure, however, is skills, achievement. How well can you do this? Okay, so it takes you 2 hours. Maybe you need additional help to get through that. Maybe you only need to understand that when you're doing your homework. And it could be in this area, but not in all areas. So speediness should not be a factor. You don't have to give 3 days to take the test, but sufficient time, and there's formulas for determining whether the student's complete or not. When you go to, by the way, computer adaptive testing, like you've been using in Compass, this factor goes away because the students have no time limits. Reliability, obviously, is essential, and I'm going to talk about that in a little while. Yeah, great. I covered speediness twice. Well, that's good. It's for emphasis. Guessing. Guessing is an error variance. It's an error factor. You don't want the students to guess. True-false questions, 50%. That's not a good test. Sometimes faculty use it, but it's not the best test. If you're going to use multiple choice tests, 5 items is better than 4. 4 items is better than 3. You get the point. An alternate form, not needed again if you're using computer adaptive tests like the Compass or others. But in the old days, students will mess up, or they didn't take the test seriously. So we're going to retesting. You have to have an alternate form. Computer adaptive testing solves that problem. Obviously, the course. Most colleges cannot afford the catalog of tests. So how much it costs? But that includes how long does it take to score? How many people do you need to score? How often is it taken and given? Do you need a testing center, by the way? In many cases, you don't need a testing center for the use of technology. You can use a learning lab, which has computers already, and put the testing in there. And then the testing person becomes an assistant in the learning lab. That's a way of saving money in both room and personnel, because the testing doesn't have to be available every hour like tutoring does. It can be Friday afternoons from 1 to 4 over the course, literally, of the year, potentially, or using it at a time when the space is available. I say Friday afternoons because if you look at community colleges on Friday afternoons, it's hard to find anybody, at least the students. I don't know about the faculty and staff. Usually the staff is there, I hope. And bias. It should not be a significant factor, obviously, and let me state for the record, there's no such thing as an unbiased test. The question is, how minimal can you make it? And testing companies go out of their way to do that in a process that's too complex today to discuss. The use of a test can play a big role in use of in interpreting the scores. Think about this. I'm applying for a job, and obviously I want to do well. If it's a math test, I guess I need to do well if I'm going to succeed in getting the job, or at least be a potential applicant. But on the other hand, if I give a personality test, which a number of industry companies do, personality tests are based on the student being honest. Honest in either being honest directly or not knowing what they're about. So they have an issue called social desirability. What are they looking for? What do they want? So I'm going to answer the question about, I think this is what they're looking for. So are you a criminal? No. That's a pretty obvious one. But more the personality tests are more subtle than that. But still, it's based on what you think. Now, if you're in a counseling situation and you give a personality test, why should you lie? You're wasting your time. Placement testing needs to be more related to counseling. So that means the messages you give, back to the balance between apathy and anxiety. It's serious because the test counts. We're going to use the results along with other variables. But don't overdo it. Do the best you can. And those messages reinforced in many ways. So how a test used can have a profound impact on student performance and results. What is a placement test? Okay. A placement test is a basic skills achievement test. Achievement is italicized because that's the key word. It's an achievement test that measures skill proficiency, for example, reading, writing, and mathematics, for the purpose of assessing entering college students in selecting appropriate beginning courses. It is not designed to predict whether you'll go to heaven, whether you'll get the job, whether, in fact, a whole lot of other things. It's just taking a snapshot. Can you read and how well? Can you write and how well? Can you do mathematics at what level? Okay? And the notion, therefore, in there have been some recent articles about predictive validity is garbage. It's just not accurate. If in fact, your tests, which is what they do, they correlate test scores with grades. The greater the correlation between test scores and grades, the weaker your educational system is. Because if I can say and test you and you can read at this level and I can predict you're going to get a C with a 90% probability, then you're not changing anything, you're not learning anything. The achievement test measures you at the beginning, you then provide instruction, and you change the prediction. So the notion of predictive validity is a fallacy that's been showing up in a number of results, number of research, and then people are then concluding, well, the placement test is worthless. It's a misunderstanding of what a placement test is about. Achievement tests, such a placement test, provide a snapshot of a student's skills. Why placement tests? Well, the SAT, or in Alabama, the ACT is insufficient and unavailable. Again, I could go into this, but a lot of students are coming to you, they haven't taken the ACT. Now less so, because you're requiring students in the state to take it in high school. But you're going to have students who've been out of school for a while. What do you do then? Or they come from another state. You don't have ACT scores. But there's another factor. ACT and SAT are designed to ask questions at the upper end of the continuum. Why? Because they want to make selection for universities. So they'll ask critical thinking kinds of skills. That's fine. But the focus is on questions that are at the upper end of the spectrum of skills. A placement test needs to measure the full range, but certainly the lower end. Why ask a question that 90% of the students find too easy? So if too many students get it right, a p-value of 0.9, say, 90% of the students are getting it right, you don't ask it because it doesn't make any differentiation. And the ACT, SAT focuses on the upper spectrum. Is it a good device? Yes, for what it does, within reason of what a test can do. But frankly, you're taking a risk unless you set the cut score fairly high. In other words, students will look like they're skilled, but not be when they show up in classes. And that's a discussion you probably have enough to do that you don't want to get into yet until you solve some other issues. High school grades are unreliable, insufficient, unavailable. Let me start with unavailable. Students have been out of school for many years, or they went to school someplace else and can't get them. Or they're insufficient because I haven't been to school in 10 years. What did those high schools mean? What have you been doing? You read a lot? I haven't read a book in 10 years. That makes a big difference in how well you're reading. Mathematics even more so. They're unreliable because, as I said before about placement tests within the same test within a state, even more so for high school grades. GPA better than individual grades. Students who take mathematics better than students 4 years, better than students who take 2. But a huge level of unpredictability about that. What are the standards in those schools? What does the grading standards mean? Provides more reliable and valid data. You have the students right there. You've tested them. You believe in the test, and they provide things. And administrative efficiency. There's a professor at Rutgers University 40 years ago who literally sat down and interviewed every single student. You can't do that. I mean, you're borderline crazy to expect anybody to do that. So the placement test puts you in the stadium. The other variables help you get the right seat. Okay, test reliability and validity. Reliability, synonym for reliability is consistency. If you give the same test over and over and over again, putting aside apathy and getting tired, etc., the score should be the same. If I take the test today, this morning, and then take it in the afternoon, and in one case I'm in college honors, in the other case I'm the lowest level developmental, that's not consistent. So reliability is absolutely essential. And validity does the test measure what it's supposed to measure, including, in this case, content. And the standards, the appropriate standards. Now, quickly, test reliability, computed by the publisher. Okay, now some people like to use homemade tests, what are called in-house tests. And what I found, and when I asked people this, has anybody ever written a survey? And usually most faculty members have written a survey of some kind. So you ask them, I don't know if this happened for you, but it's happened for me that occasionally students will misinterpret the question that I was asking. And so they answer a different question. And usually faculty members, oh yeah, that happens. Well, frankly, that's what an in-house test is about. In order to create, I know the word standardize has a terrible connotation in some people's minds, but in order to create a reliable, valid test, there are multiple things that you have to try out. Questions that you think are good may not be. Sometimes questions you don't think are so good turn out to be. You have to do statistics. You have to try it. You have to do a pilot. You have to make sure that the students are trying it out, represent the sample that you want it to represent. Those never happen in assessment. A faculty member writes a final exam, and I'm not suggesting faculty members stop writing final exams, but the reliability and validity is never tested. It's assumed. I've been teaching for 78 years. Okay, that's good, but can you write a good test? Very difficult to do for one or two people, and that's true for an institution. So frankly, recommendation, don't try it for doing a statewide testing program, and I don't think you attempted to do that anyway, but I wanted to put the nail in the coffin on that. But the second part, equally important, and many people don't understand this. A student's true score falls within a possible range of scores. Again, the example I gave you before, K to 12, and you get these charts with the bar graphs. A test is not perfect. No test is perfect. And you have a probability of a range of scores. Okay? So this range is measured by a statistic called the standard error of measurement. SEM. And if you get nothing else, you should memorize SEM. Any of my students in Kellogg tease me about you focused a lot on SEM because it's key to what else follows. It sets up a placement process that has gray areas or ranges instead of one score. Yet across the country, and frankly in Alabama, if you got, don't hold me to the number, if you got a 50, you're okay. If you got a 49, you take developmental ed. That's crazy. It cannot happen. And then you say, well, the student was misplaced. It's not the test's fault, it's your interpretation of the test. Okay, so you start by having a range. What does it mean to have a range or a gray area? It means that if you get really low, yeah, you need developmental ed. And if you get really high, yeah, you're ready for college courses. But a heck of a lot of students fall in the middle. And that's where the multiple variables come in. But let me make the following statement. I have seen valedictorians do terrible in a placement test. High school valedictorians do terrible in school. So what happens? Frankly, I had a hangover. Now, it's not as common as the dog ate my paper, but it happens. And so when you see a student who's got good grades, done well, has good ACT scores, and they do poorly on the placement test, you say, what's going on? And invariably something happened. Okay? That's why you need to have multiple variables virtually in everything you're doing with placement tests. It's similar to a poll. Candidate A scores 52%, candidate B 4%, and the score range, you read this little thing, plus or minus 4 points. That means, nobody believes it, but that means there's a tie. That 4 points is the equivalent of a standard error measurement. Exactly the same mathematical concept exists for testing. Okay, so what do? Well, let's set up cut ranges instead of cut scores, along the lines, the example I gave. Don't hold me to the numbers. You start with other people's experience. Okay, if you're going to develop a test, you're going to buy a test, what is happening? What's the national average? Or what's the state average even? And have the faculty look, does that seem reasonable? And then select it, because you could do it statistically, but it'll take you several years and cost a lot of money. Frankly, it's not worth it. I'm going to recommend a simpler procedure. Then you test and place the students, see what happens. Using this as an estimate. And maybe you need to adjust a few points over time. You collect the data and you adjust it accordingly. Now, if in fact the goal is that nobody gets changed, that's a goal, but that's not going to happen. There will always be students that you made a mistake on. And so the example I gave before, the English teacher gives an essay. Okay, they give an essay, say, wow, Mary, look at this student's paper. And they say, that student doesn't need to be in developmental ed. That's always going to happen. Now, if it happens a lot, you got a problem with your whole placement process. Okay, and the way to evaluate is to include this data. And again, we'll talk about the task force, so you don't need to do this today. And you test and place the students, you collect the data, and you see and adjust it. But recognize, no test is perfect. No test is perfect. There'll always be some error. The use of multiple variables increases the accuracy of making placement decisions. In fact, I've been asked to testify when a state didn't do this, and I told them flat out, you're going to lose, because I'm going to say, you guys are crazy. You cannot do that. Okay? And they backed off asking me to testify. Duh. That was smart on their part, but still, they eventually created ranges using mandated multiple variables. Placement tests should never be made on the basis of one score, one test. Use cut scores instead of cut ranges instead of cut scores. Okay. What are the factors that you would use in making placement decisions? No, it's a testing process, and I think I've covered almost all of those things, so we're going to go on. What are the things that you need to do to make placement decisions? Test all entering students. Collect background information on each student. And that's not easy to do. One of the things in talking to Annette, said we're trying out a pilot of holistic assessment at her college. We can't get the GPAs to add to the placement test. There's a K-12 discussion. How can we get the high schools to work on giving us the GPA? Why GPA versus grades? Because when you combine a whole bunch of courses, you standardize the process of what a GPA is, or high school rank, also very good estimation of what a student's achievement are. Students who get good GPA or score high in the high school rank are usually pretty good students for a variety of reasons beyond academic skills. Good measures. So add that to a placement test, you're better than either alone. Analyze the multiple data, use cut range to gray areas, make a decision about placement for each student in each content area. I didn't cover this before, but in fact, you don't make a decision on developmental ed or not. You make it on developmental ed in reading, in English or writing, and in mathematics, independently, because having worked at an engineering school, I learned that students can do very well in placement tests on the SAT and couldn't write worth a dime. Of course, at that time, they would say their secretary will write their papers for them. We know that doesn't happen anymore. Anyway, okay, so what are the factors? Placement test scores, and I have them in priority order. To me, that's the most important thing. Then after that, what other data? ACT data, other tests, high school background data, rank, GPA, non-cognitive factors, motivation, maturity, responsibility. You say, well, that's tough to measure. I'm not asking you to come up with a score. This is where good advisors get a feel. What are you doing? Well, you know, I graduated from high school and frankly, I didn't do anything. Versus the person who's been working a number of hours, went to work during the summer. You get a good advisor, counselor, gets a good feel. Like a person interviewing a person for the job. You get a good feel for the motivation when you get to know, establish rapport with the student, person who's trained to look for those things. Life background issues. 2 students. One is a single parent, working 40 hours a week, struggling to make ends meet, You don't want to put them in a course that's over their head. Now, I'm not overruling the placement test score. I'm going down the list and adding to the factors of creating a picture of what this student can do, is doing, is capable of doing. So it's not like you have to create a test for that, but you can ask. And you fill out an application, you can collect data. When you take the test, you can survey the students. Did your parents go to college? Did they graduate? That gives an indication, yes or no, about how much they might know about. You don't assume that the answer is accurate, but you use that to put together a picture of what the student is, a holistic approach to assessing students. Life background issues, I just covered that. And sometimes additional testing. You get to a point where, frankly, I don't know what else to say. How about if you take the test over again, see how you do? That doesn't always work, and I'm not suggesting you do it for every student who needs developmental aid. By the way, nobody ever takes the test if you get into a college course and don't want to take it again to find out that maybe they don't need it. But in fact, the factors work both ways. You could have students that look like they just made it into college courses who are no different than the students who just didn't make it. In fact, again, another flaw in some of the research that's going on is they compare students a few points above with a few points below, and guess what? They find no difference. Duh. Of course there's no difference. There was no difference in the first place. So why would you expect to find a difference? Because the score, the standard error of measurement, overlapped. Retesting can be helpful if review and learning has taken place. Just taking it again without doing anything is probably not wise. A waste of time, a waste of money. Guidelines are established, and that's another thing the task force, frankly, should look at, establishing guidelines for when a student is allowed to take the test, because that's expensive, unless you're charging the student, and that brings up other issues. Reasons are documented. Who waived the student to take, or who allowed the student, permitted the student to take the test? That's important, because now you want to go back and say, how come the student's in my class? Well, I let them take the test. Second test did well. Well, why did you do that? It doesn't have to be a paragraph. It could be 2 lines. On the basis of data, we didn't have sufficient information to make a decision, so we had the student take it again. Both scores should be used. Why? Well, there's a thing called regression toward the mean. If you test a student or do anything a second time, they tend to go to the mean. If you test a student that scored high, more than likely, since they already scored high, they're going to go down the second time. But no one takes the test if they score high. So what happens? The student did poorly, test it again. What's the direction? It's the only one left to go up. So suddenly the second test is more accurate than the first? No, you're not going to go from arithmetic to calculus because you suddenly did well in this test. What happened? Including did you cheat, but on an adaptive test, real difficult to do. And the person authorizing is documented so you know, go back. And I recommend you create a written policy in Alabama, since you're doing things at the state level. Good to create a written policy for everybody to create common standards. Retesting should require permission. It's another reason for requiring permission. Student doesn't do well in the test. Let's say it's a summer bridge program. That's where retesting is built into the program, or should be. Okay, in that case, you probably don't have to have a whole separate thing by an advisor because the summer bridge program builds retesting in. Why bother to take this if you're not going to take the test again? So that's already built in there. But you're recommending discussion with a counselor. Rather than just showing up at the testing center, take it again because the rules say I can do it. No, go talk to a counselor. Go talk to an advisor. Let's go through this. Let's find out more about why you did that, why you want to do this. Document who approved the reason. Second retesting. What I mean by second test is like taking it for the third time. Some places allow the students to keep taking it until they pass. And sometimes they pass in the middle of a semester. Guess what? If you go to Las Vegas and keep pulling the slot, the probability is eventually going to win. Not always, but the probability increases. You're eventually going to win. You keep taking the same test questions over and over again, you might ultimately guess correctly. That doesn't mean you've learned anymore or that you're any more skilled than you were before. So ban unlimited repeated testing. It's counterproductive, sends the wrong message, may decrease accuracy of results. I kind of cover this conceptually. Interrupts courses and classes in the example I gave. It doesn't have to, but it does. And may impede learning because the student thinks they've suddenly done well and they don't take the course, they don't complete the course they need to take. How to use the test results. Provide students with information to devise successful plans. This is back to advising. Indicate students' level of preparation. Forecast additional time for developmental education. Let the student know when you take these courses, this is what's going to happen. Build that into the advising program. Advise students in choosing first career goal. That's back to the structured pathways. Develop a student education plan. Create a structured pathways using advising system. Okay, I'm not going to go into all of this right now. It's too much detail. Okay, compass is ending. What to do? Well, continue using the compass, and then you have a task force to pick a new test. Pick one, and then make the transition before compass ends, or maybe if you can, use some pilot, see what happens before you go to the whole state. Develop a new plan for assessment and placement. Okay, because you got to have to look at the cut ranges and all the things that we've discussed. Because up until now, it's been one test, one score for most students at most colleges. Decide on a new test. I put AccuPlacer because that's a computer adaptive test. It'd be easy to do. Doesn't mean I'm recommending it. I know that the task force is looking into it, and I think you have 3. Make a decision and move on and implement new plan. Okay, that's it for this presentation. This afternoon, we're going to have an opportunity to raise any questions, but we could also start now if you want to. And tomorrow, I'm going to cover everything I covered here, plus more detail for the task force.
Good. Well, thank you, Dr. Ryan. We appreciate your time. We'll kind of save the discussion for after lunch if that works. Two quick items before we move on. I would like to recognize our Vice President for our State Board of Education, Mr. Jeff Newman. Jeff is back there, and we appreciate your attendance here today. Thank you very much. And would also like to ask Dr. Ward if he would come forward. I've asked him to just speak very briefly on an exciting new program that Lawson State, I guess, has launched and will be launching. And then I think you're going to give us instructions on what to do from here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chancellor and members of the board. Just wanted to share very briefly, about a new event that we are planning here at Lawson State to implement next year. We're in the process of developing an advanced manufacturing center here at the college this year. And we're in the process of focusing on mechatronics. And just quick information, mechatronics is a multidisciplinary field of engineering that includes a combination of various systems and disciplines: engineering, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, telecommunications engineering, control engineering, and computer engineering. We're doing all of those programs right now, but they are really disjointed. Now we're talking about putting them into a very comprehensive, systematic approach where we can evaluate the students who go through that program and we can track them out. Our staff has already been out to Portland, Oregon this summer to start the process of pulling this together. In January, we'll be putting some staff people in a training session up to Tennessee. In April of next year, in 2016, we'll have 2 to 3 of our faculty members who will be going to Germany for a 2-week training process to be certified in the Mechatronics training program, and they will in fact then come back here to the state and start working with business and industry. It's German certification. We have a lot of plants and industries coming in right now serving as suppliers to Mercedes and other dealerships. So we think this will be very, very timely and can make a significant difference in helping the workforce. So we're really excited about that, and also just excited about, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, about the Board of Trustees being out in the community, visiting community colleges, because once you understand the role that community colleges in the state of Alabama plays, you will really begin to understand. I can't envision the state of Alabama not being helped by community colleges. It is the fabric of what makes this state work. When you look at our health care programs at all of our community colleges in every sector of the state's providing service and help The hospitals and the healthcare facilities simply could not do it. You think about the HVAC technicians, the automotive technicians, and you will see that many of our community colleges have a lot of specialties. We've got health care here at Lawson State. Our nursing scores, Dr. Cater know, for this year, and the standards went up. We're 100%, both the LPN and the RN program, and Lawson State is a premier center for automotive instruction. On our campuses here in Birmingham and in Bessemer, we have what we call the Alabama Center for Automotive Excellence. We provide training for Chevrolet, for Ford, and for Toyota. And we were just recently, about 2 weeks ago, contacted by Fiat Chrysler, and they have asked to join our partnership. So we'll be one of the few community colleges in the nation that's dealing with and serving 4 major automotive manufacturers in this country. And I think that's pretty significant, and the only one in Alabama that's serving in that capacity. President Obama heard about us as I close. He wanted to come down and visit. He came down in March of this year and spoke to our student body on this very same campus. I think our students were absolutely elated. He spent about 4 hours here on campus meeting with faculty and staff, and he did that because we had been recognized by the White House as a champion of change for the workforce development programs that we have been providing here in our community. In 2013, selected by the White House, and somewhere we think that may have played a part in the White House selecting us for the president to come down and do a press conference. So we believe in doing something different, and if you visit or when you get the opportunity to visit all of the community colleges in the 2-year college system, you will see without a doubt the valuable job that they're doing in their local community to move this economy forward, to really be an economic engine that can really make a difference. And we're just excited about your being here today. We've got a lot of other good things going on, and we're going to do a quick tour. We've got a bus waiting outside for the board members to get you to lunch, and just do a brief orientation because we know you got to get back and do the work session. But again, thank you, and our Chancellor and members of the board will continue to keep you updated on the Advanced Manufacturing Center that's going to be going forward. Thank you very much, and we're delighted to have you here on campus. Thank you.
Anything else, Chancellor? Okay, very good. We appreciate everyone that presented today, and especially Dr. Moranti. We appreciate the thought-provoking presentation that you made on unprepared students, and we're interested in being more engaged in this and addressing this situation. We'll reconvene again in this room. It's set for 1 p.m. for our work session this afternoon, but as time dictates, we may end up being about 1:15 or so starting. Our next Board of Trustees regular meeting will be November 12th at 10 a.m. In our boardroom in Montgomery. Anything else from any of the trustees? There being nothing, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor, raise your hand. Opposed? We stand adjourned.